Do you love everything football? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Beyond the Touchline, a Football Manager Central podcast with your hosts, Paul, Ryan, and Colin.
Good evening, guys. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we are going to be talking the last 7 days in the world of football. So let's go over to yourself, Ryan, first. How have you found the last 7 days with the international window?
There's not really a lot that goes on during the international window, but there's a few things that we'll get out there during this show, a few things that I've noted down, Colin has noted down, and I'm sure you've also got some ideas to get out there.
Totally. I think there's a couple of things I want to talk about. And one of the things I wanted to bring up to start with was actually to do with the international weekend. And basically Norway have just this evening gone out 3-0 on aggregate to Hungary. And I think first thing we want to say is obviously sad news of Martin Fulop from Hungary losing his life after a battle with cancer last week. So obviously that's some sad news coming from there. But they got the victory, maybe inspired to do it for him. But I think the frustrating thing and the thing I want to bring up is in the first leg, Norway looked so weak and they weren't playing Martin Odegaard. And that brings me to the question, Colin, I want to ask you.
Sure.
If a player is not playing for the club side, should he play for the national side?
It's an interesting question, and oddly enough, it's one that has bounced around the CONCACAF region so much with Chicharito and Mexico when he was with Manchester United. Right, he's obviously the feature striker for the Mexican national team, and he was sitting on the bench, at Manchester United almost all the time, and there was a huge backlash of, why they kept bringing him into the team and kept playing him. So I said, well, he's not playing. How do you know he's any good? There was a lot of push for like Gio dos Santos to start moving up or starting to look for other players there. So it was interesting in that respect. I think to me, Norway is exactly the opposite. I understand Martin Odegaard's not playing. He's 16 at Real Madrid. Unless he walked on water and turned, the water bench into wine when he walked by it, he's not going to get on that team at 16. But he is at that club. He is training with the elite of the elite in club soccer. Why in God's name would you not put him on that field and just for something, just to spark? He's got to make a difference for that club. I thought it was horrendous that he left him on the bench. They needed something, and to be fair, he's got to he's got to be the best guy on that bench, even in that squad. Get him out there.
They had it was so frustrating because the team was struggling. They were lacking that creative spark in the team. The whole way through the game, the crowd was chanting his name. And now, in the past, if somebody said, should a player play for the national team when he's not playing for the club side, I think I'd have said no. I think I'd have said, well, if you're not doing it at club level, you don't deserve to do it at national level, Ryan.
Yeah, it's exactly right, but if you've got someone of his quality, like Colin is saying, give him a chance. I didn't watch all of the game today, but I watched roughly about half an hour. In that half an hour, Odegaard was on the pitch, and you said exactly the same that I was thinking. Odegaard was getting into the spaces, he was dropping off his man. The other players just couldn't get it to him. His movement is absolutely fantastic. It's a step above most of the Norwegian players, and it shows he's going to be a top quality player.
I think that was the issue this evening. In the second leg, they started him, but they took him off at half time, which I don't understand why. Because I would think, I'm not sure. Apart from the defence, due to Norway deciding that 1-0 down on the night, they would pass it around at the back. Apart from the defence having the most touches, I would think he had the most touches in the first half because he was always dropping off. He was always coming for the ball, coming deep. He was picking out some nice passes. He was taking all the set pieces, and they take him off. And second half was so dull. There's some players in the Norwegian squad who just should not be there at the minute, and it's so frustrating. I mean, the manager, I would assume, is going to be leaving because he's got the agenda where he has said Odegaard's not playing, he's not going to be in the national team, he's not going to start. But everybody can see, every time he comes on the pitch, he produces. And it's like Colin said, he's training with the best of the best. So when he's turning up to the Norwegian squad, he's getting a chance, he's doing well. And he is playing for the second team in Madrid, so it's not like he's not getting any match fitness, Colin, which is frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, and you and I had bounced this question back and forth a little bit, in today or yesterday. At what point at what point would you say it's reasonable for the Norwegian FA to step in and say, look, he's clearly by far the most superior talent on the team right now, and you've got a manager who's there saying, I'm not playing him. He's not getting it done. He's not playing where I want him to be playing, so I won't put him out there. And he's clearly by far the best product going on right now. And I agree. I watched a little bit of when he was out when you guys had made notes earlier and said, oh, he's on the field. And to me, the quality gap was huge, right? That he was dropping, he was finding space, and there was such an inability to find him. So clearly at 16, he's still massively better than the rest of the squad. If you're at the FA level, at what point do you step in? Do you step in? Is it right to step in and say, hey, what are you doing? You're killing us here, I mean, in a playoff on the verge of Euro qualification here, and you put out a purposefully weakened side, to me, that makes no sense.
It's crazy. I mean, we're going to move on and just talk about some club football. Just an incident I want to bring up. I mean, football's been overshadowed in the last couple of days, and I think it would be disrespectful of ourselves not to mention the incidents in Beirut, Baghdad, and in Paris over the last 24 hours, or 48 hours, sorry. And obviously our thoughts are with everybody who's been hurt in that. But there's reports coming out today, Ryan, where David Luiz, for one, has stated he doesn't want to return to the club after what's happened, and you can almost understand it. You can understand the fear they have. I mean, they're going to be protected, but just the fear to return to the city. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to visit the city now at this exact minute. So, I mean, that begs the question, with the likes of Ronaldo and Mourinho being linked there, you don't want to say, but it's looking like outside influences are going to start shaping football.
Yeah, it's always been the way. Outside influences are always going to affect football. I don't know, it's a hard topic to talk about.
It's a hard topic, but it's something that has to be addressed because it's a very sad incident, and obviously, I mean, can you see, just in football general terms, I mean, is Jose Mourinho really going to step into the French league?
I don't think he would. I think he'd find the French league too easy.
I think he would turn into like some crazy media person. I mean, he likes the media to keep him entertained. Imagine if he had to put up with the French football as well.
Yeah, I think he would keep up, but going into that league, he's going to go to PSG. PSG are already way ahead of most teams in that league. He'd find it too easy. He'd get bored very easily. He wouldn't last very long.
That's what I mean. If he gets bored, you can imagine how exaggerated his media meetings would be then. Colin, I mean, when you look at the second name there with Cristiano Ronaldo, I mean, really? Paris Saint-Germain?
I suspect that the links to bring him out to MLS when he's done it at Real Madrid are probably stronger. But to your first point about, with David Luiz and wanting to not go back to Paris after this, I think, a great example, and, it's similar in many respects, would have been, some of the baseball games that were played in New York City after 9/11 here. I mean, it was an entirely different attitude. Everybody wanted to be there because it was a distraction for, the 2 hours that you're going to be out there, the 3 hours that you're going to be at the stadium. It's a time where you can come together, you can kind of put it aside, you can, everyone's there together, and, it's a sense of normalcy. And I understand, where he's at, that, it was significantly disrupting. I mean, it was heartbreaking to watch what happened from here. But, to some degree or another, as a sporting personality that's there, and the teams, you need to step back out on the pitch because the people of that city need them more than ever to go out and do, for it to be Saturday, right? It's, match day, whatever, and they're there. And, there's a sense of normal back out there. So, I hope that they do recognize that they do need to be stronger for not just themselves, but to help support the city around them.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. So I think from us three beyond the touchline, we obviously hope that Paris stays strong. And obviously, as we have seen, the whole world is behind Paris, Beirut and Baghdad through this difficult time. So we'll get back to what we know best, which is football. I saw an interesting story this week, Ryan. Oscar is linked a move away from Chelsea to Juventus. Now, this was something I actually thought I could see happening because he's not really been featuring as much as he was in the past. I mean, there was a time where they wanted to build the team around him. What do you think, Colin?
I'm actually really intrigued with that because I think your last piece there that 2 years ago he was the guy they were going to build that squad around, and now all of a sudden he's barely he doesn't play very often. When he's out there, it's mostly he's substituted off 60th minute. I can't tell if it's one of those like he's just fallen out of Mourinho's favor in one of those sort of classic Mourinho fits of whatever he goes through, or if there's really some significant issue with either playing style, work ethic, anything of that sort of issue going on behind the scenes at the clubs that that we really wouldn't get any perspective on. But given the state of things now, I think it's an interesting move. Juventus clearly have been, they've lost some phenomenal talent out of that club. I mean, you take, it's very similar to the Liverpool arguments when Suarez went away, right? You take Tevez out of there and, the rest of what they've lost. And, okay, Pogba's good, but he's not a one-man army. So it's very interesting to me to see, that a move like that sort of dynamic, creative playmaker to sort of replace the, it's Pirlo with speed almost. I would be very interested that could make Juventus a very different team coming out of the January transfer window if they do make that happen.
I think what I would say is with international football happening, there's a lot of transfer rumours going around because basically the newspapers have nothing else to talk about. So a couple of things that attracted me this week, what I saw, Colin, was Newcastle were linked to go head-to-head with Tottenham over Berahino. And there's no way the lights of the bright lights of London are going to get overlooked for him to come up and play for Newcastle in a relegation battle.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's going to happen. I think, okay, so St. James's Park is a pretty magical place, but no one's going to blow off White Hart Lane. And at least Europa League football, the promise of trying to build a squad to go top four hunting, and I think they're getting, Tottenham's starting to get into that conversation a little more. It's going to be very difficult to go, come down and potentially see what the championship looks like next year. Versus, hey, you want to go see what Europa League looks like? You'd have, if he did go to Newcastle, I would be stunned to see what the pitch was that they made. Yeah,
please.
Yeah.
I think Ryan, one of the most interesting things I saw this week was Eden Hazard being linked to Inter Milan. Now, either the Italian league has just massively had an electric shock, or Hazard's stature in world football has just massively declined.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. He's not having the best of seasons, if we're going to put it out there. But Inter Milan, Italian football, Hazard, no, just doesn't link to me. I see Hazard at Real Madrid in the future. Well, I think they'll splash out another 80 million. Go, there we go. We'll have Hazard as well.
bag on Italian football, but another good year beyond this one in continental competition, and it's entirely possible they could surpass England with the coefficients and move into the third best league in Europe.
They could
Ryan,
well be.
Have you got your notepad open? If Italy take over England in the next couple of years in the coefficients, I will do any song live on air. It's not going to happen.
They're not far off.
They may take over in coefficient, but they will never take over in terms of quality, because Italian football is like a snooze fest.
Yeah. But we'll move away from transfers because it's half of them genuinely. I think they literally just picked a name, spun a wheel, picked a club off it, and just gone. He's going there. Oh, look at this! Gareth Bale's joining Blackburn. Talking about Blackburn, Tim Sherwood obviously thought the club was too small. He rejected a move to Blackburn, and it's now turned out Paul Lambert has become the new manager of Blackburn. I can't decide if it's a good move. I genuinely am interested and intrigued to see what he's going to do. I mean, he's either going to destroy Jordan Rhodes into a 5-goal-a-season man, or he's going to reignite his managerial career, Colin, and do something special.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm actually more annoyed with Sherwood for rejecting that deal, because to me, it displays a total lack of understanding on Sherwood's part about what he really needs himself to be successful in management. I think, he has to get up and look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm not a Premier League manager yet. And to go down to a lower level, build some experience, develop it, develop his managerial skills at a different level and potentially work his way back up, to me was, this was a gift that somebody said, hey, I'm going to give you an opportunity. And I think it's really short-sighted of him to say no, because I suspect that, we'll go through some more silly season after the Christmas window and New Year's and that in England, and they'll fire some more coaches, and somebody will make the mistake and try and bring him in, and it'll go just as sideways as it did, in his last 2 attempts at this. So I'm much more annoyed by that than anything else.
I think the issue with Sherwood, I've not seen it myself, but I've heard a lot of rumours that he classes himself as a top-class manager. So I think, as you said, that's why he's declined Blackburn. He sees himself at a bigger club, which is interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it shows a huge level of sort of naivete on his part to say that either he's just doing this out in public just to do it, or he hasn't genuinely taken the time to look back at his body of work in the Premier League and say, okay, this is, I'm not ready for this. This wasn't right. This was disastrous on its best days, and epically awful on its worst, and he really needs to go and develop. Just the same as you take a player who wasn't ready for that level and get them down lower divisions, get them first team experience, get them in, get them building, get some confidence, and move back up. I think it's just the same for managers, and to stand there and have him say, to see him sort of blow it off as he's big, he's a bigger, better manager than that. I think, to me, the short answer is no, he's not. And until he sort of wakes up and realizes it, I can't imagine his job prospects are going to look spectacular.
I think when you look at some former players who have took managerial jobs, I mean, we can use Paul Lambert as a fantastic example. Won the European Cup at Borussia Dortmund, fantastic playing career, and he has managed at the likes of Wycombe Wanderers. So he's been there, he's done it. He worked his way up. He got the job at Aston Villa, for example. He didn't have the best time there, but he's now dropped back down. So I think fair play to him for giving it a go. As I said, I'm unsure how it's going to work. He's either going to destroy them or do well, but that's only because of how, in my opinion, how defensively poor and focused. He seemed so focused eventually, yet so bad at it at Villa. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works, Ryan. But let's say some players who had very good careers happy to start at the bottom. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. Rio Ferdinand's already said he wants to be a manager, and if a low league club comes in with the right offer, with the offer that he can control the club, he doesn't want to come in and be told who to buy and sell, he'll drop low down. But then you look on the other hand, he said, I'm willing to drop down. And then you kind of think, well, no, it's your first job in management, so you're not dropping down, you're starting.
Yeah.
So I think, what's it like in the US, Colin, in terms of MLS or even second tier, third tier management? If you have players like Landon Donovan, for example, or former players, where do they enter the coaching? Do they enter in the back room? Do they get first team coaching roles straight away?
It's a little varied, and I think some of it depends on, a lot of it depends on who the ownership wants. So people associated with the national team, former internationals for the U.S. tend to be the sort of lusted after coaches. Level doesn't seem to matter. So good example, right? What FC Cincinnati, I believe a USL team that just announced that they were founding to start next year, went for John Harkes, who is an excellent former U.S. international and part of our 94, the phenomenal 94 squad that we had. So he's been a big, right into head coaching. I mean, he's done some work, at least to my knowledge, at college level and in and out with other different teams. But he's a big profile. And okay, so you're in third division of U.S. soccer, but it's hardly a big deal. A lot of others, do backroom work. So we've seen various, I know Donovan has expressed interest, and he said, I'll coach, whatever it is versus, going out and running into management. Although he said, yeah, I want to be a manager someday. And I suspect he will be. And I suspect he'll end up at the MLS level. But a lot of the coaching in soccer in the U.S. seems to, at least to me, be a lot more of, this is who the owner wants, so this is who they go and get. Siggy Schmidt in Seattle is a good one. That ownership, he is a very highly credentialed and an excellent coach. Don't get me wrong, but the ownership really loves him and feels that he's the right guy, and they really like him. And even if it's an up and down season, for the most part, that job is it's a very Wenger-esque type moment deal here. That job is his job. So I think it's a little different, and things seem to be a little more stable coaching-wise here. It's not the same for other sports, but there seems to be a bit more stability in at least the football coaching realm, just because I don't think there is quite as big a pool to say, as you would have in England or Germany or Spain or something else, just because of the huge tier system and the opportunity to play and at various different levels. It's not quite as developed. So, that ex-player coaching pool is a much smaller thing here.
I think actually what I want to just quick jump on you while we're talking about the US. There's a couple of things you were talking about the coaching pool, and there's not as much change. And the season's just ended, as we discussed I think it was last week. We discussed how Patrick Vieira's become the new manager of New York City FC. Has there been any other changes in the MLS?
Right now, no. The Siggy Schmidt was a big one, so there was some people questioning whether he would stay in Seattle or Seattle would stay with him. The ownership came out at their end of year town hall and said absolutely. He's the man for the job. So things are relatively stable for the most part. I wouldn't expect most coaching changes here to happen until probably January, if they do happen at all. So a lot of teams like to go through, let MLS Cup go out. Then December has some of the drafts, the re-entry drafts, things like they cut the players and that kind of thing. And then, if they make any changes over, then it's usually in January so that the teams have time to plot to the Super Draft, which I believe is usually February, and then as they get ready for the season to start at the end of March on that front. So it's been pretty quiet on that front.
I think, Ryan, I think it's time to throw the quiz on Colin. I was watching the US versus St. Vincent, is it?
Yep, St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Are you ready for the question I'm going to ask you?
Sure.
There was a winger for St. Vincent who plays for Seattle too, and he has been linked with playing in their first team next year. What are your thoughts on him?
So one, I was insanely upset that we let him score 5 minutes into the game.
That's why I wanted to bring him up.
So I had a mini aneurysm Friday night when that happened. It was, for a team we were supposed to manhandle. He's good.
Can we just say, for people who don't know, Colin described this game as England versus San Marino.
Yes, at best.
And they scored after a couple of minutes.
Yes, and San Marino, to follow the analogy, San Marino would have spent 8 minutes winning.
Which is just insane.
Yes, and I was losing my mind. It was very impressive. I mean, if you watch the goal, he beat the defense. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't something weird. It wasn't an anomaly. The skies didn't part and magic, happened.
Fairies come out.
Yeah, he legitimately scored. He got the ball. He beat a couple of guys, and he put that in the back of the net. I think he did a lot there to help his stock to go to the Seattle Sounders first team, especially as that first team is starting to age over a little bit. But it was very interesting to see. And he had a couple of good moments throughout the game. I mean, for a game where I think the possession ended up like 85-15 in favor of the U.S., when he got on the ball, he was dangerous. They paid attention to him, especially after he burned them, which, you're not necessarily going to say the same for a lot of the guys on that club. Or that squad. So I'm intrigued. I like to see him. I thought the other piece in that game, Darlington Nagbe getting his first cap for the U.S. was fantastic. That's been a big move. So U.S. soccer has looked for some players coming out of Africa and working on citizenship with them to be able to facilitate their way into the national team here. He looked very good. Matt Miazga got his cap as well. I think he's a very, very promising center back for the national team and for the 2018 cycle in there. And we talked a little bit last week. Kakuna Mane, the Vancouver Whitecaps, is on that trail as well. And there were some reports even this week that on one that goes back for you guys, Dom Dwyer in Kansas City, as to whether or not the U.S. would be looking to fast track citizenship for him to potentially look to put him up front for the U.S. men's national team on there. So that was interesting. I thought that was actually a very interesting thought.
I think you're talking there's so many fast tracking or trying to sort out or search in Africa for U.S. citizens. And we discussed this as it's come out that the US are planning on banning kids under the age of 10 in the under 10 competitions, tournaments, etc. from being able to head a football. Now, if you are struggling to develop it, I mean, the size of America, you should have players lined up around the block with the ability. So the fact that you're struggling to find people currently from within the US, the fact now that the plan is to develop them lacking one of the skills, it's not going to help.
Yeah, there was an interesting... So, concussions is a huge deal in the U.S., especially with the NFL over the last year or two. It's become a much, much bigger deal. And it's become, it's very much so forefront in the sporting mind here. There was an interesting statistic that Taylor Twellman, who's a former U.S. international, had mentioned on a radio show here this week, and I'm gonna get the age bracket wrong, but it was something like 98% of U.S. soccer players stop playing after like age 16. So the question from U.S. soccer's perspective, and if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, is it right to let players in the under 10 and I think it's below U12 or U14 to regulate how much heading they do, engage in an activity which is potentially shown long-term damage when the overwhelming majority of them aren't going to use that skill ever, right? They're just never going to play again. Second yellow card and I actually were having an interesting discussion on Twitter when the story came out over the week. And sort of the thought I had was, it's interesting in that, one, I agree with you. It doesn't suit the style that we have now, and it's a skill and a technique that we're sort of heavily dependent on, right? We play a very long ball aerial game, counterattacking, direct passing type game. Does this decision, starting from a youth level, force us to learn how to play a different game? Does it force us to learn how to play a game on the deck with efficient passing, which is a very different style than we play now? So I think it's interesting because there are long-term ramifications to the game and the way it's played here with this decision. I don't suspect they'll go back on it. Like I said, I think the fact that many of the players who play the game don't play it long-term, and there are definite links to health impacts and health issues with potential concussions and at age 10 whacking your head into the ball all the time and not necessarily knowing how to do it right, does potentially breed problems. So does this force a change in style for the U.S. that could potentially have bigger, broader, and better impacts moving forward?
I mean, from that side of it, I can completely see what you're saying there, Colin. Obviously, if you can't head the ball, you're going to be forced to get it down, and before you know it, they're going to be technically better. Technically more skilled with the ball at the feet. But, I mean, come on. I mean, the amount of times I used to head a ball when I was a kid. I mean...
Not the best advertisement, I gotta tell you.
Thanks.
I think...
I was just about to say that the good thing is we've actually got a person on here who coaches youth football. So, Ryan, if one of your players ducks out the way of a header, what will you say to him?
Yeah, so when I was coaching my under-12 team, if anybody ducked out the way, I would scream at them saying, "Why have you just ducked?" It's a football, not a cricket ball.
I think
a football's not going to hurt you, but when you look at it, I'm also a PE teacher. If I have a lesson of football and I'm said, "You're doing heading," my lessons are 2 hours long. I cannot do 2 hours on heading. And also in football, the FA give guidelines in sessions. You cannot do a whole session on heading because of concussion and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, I can understand what Americans are doing in setting the younger age groups to not do heading. But not doing it at all is what I can't understand. You can do at the start of every session, and this is what I got going in my under-12s, and it's what I'll be doing in my lessons for football. Do 5-10 minutes of heading at the start as a warm-up. Just practice the skill, practice long heading, practice power heading, practice heading it down to the floor. It's not something that's going to end up killing somebody. Concussion, it may cause it, but if you teach them how to do it correctly, teach them not to head it on top of their head, which is where concussion is mostly caused, teach it to head with the forehead, then I don't see any issue.
I mean, yeah. I think, Colin, I mean, this comes from a nation who plays NFL, so I mean, I've got to ask, do under 10s play NFL?
I'm not a huge, as big an expert, but for the most part, you're not tackled until you get much older. That it's flag and touch football, mostly flag football.
I think it's personal opinion. I think it's ridiculous.
So it's a bit like rugby. It's a bit like how rugby's taught over here. In years 7 and 8, which I'm not sure what that is in America, they're 11, 12 and 13. They can't play they can't play tackling rugby, so they can't tackle properly. They have to play touch.
Well, can I just say, when I was aged 11, I played for the rugby team, only because I could kick the ball.
Yeah, I know. I think now
I got
in a
absolutely destroyed at times during that.
Yeah, in a lesson, it's not allowed. In a game, it's allowed if everybody has a gum shield on.
I think people listening, let us know in the comments below. I just think health and safety's gone crazy. I mean, you're going to be sending your kids to school wrapped in bubble wrap soon.
Well, I mean, and keep in mind, it's U10, right? So above U10, I think it's U14 where they're limiting to how it's done in practice. So I think it's, to the same thing what you were talking about, Ryan. Okay, from, at 11, 12, 13, 14, if you're working on the right technique and how to do it, okay, that's not necessarily an issue. But you have a whole block of 10-year-olds who aren't necessarily, no offense to the 10-year-old community, but isn't exactly notorious for its best attention and focus, and it is a skill, right? Like, I mean, it's not just something that happens naturally, right? Getting it onto the forehead and how to manage it, and that is a skill. So, if you have a block of players who are never going to do it again, and you have a developing age where they're going to do it wrong, are you really you're potentially doing some long-term harm to them that they don't need to have done. I'm not necessarily totally opposed to it. I thought about it.
Do you know what I find funny? You have myself, who doesn't do anything involved in this, so I literally just think that the kids need to suck it up. You have Ryan, who's a coach, who talks about how he coaches them how to do it properly. Then you have Colin, who deals with medical equipment, who's against it. This is literally working in exactly how I think I would have guessed people to answer. So we'll move on before Colin starts telling us the equipment needed to fix concussion. We're going to end this evening with a chat, which has been going around this week, Ryan. Neymar, has he done enough to be the world's best player?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Nowhere near yet. He's a good player, no doubt, but not world's best.
Would you be surprised if he wins the Ballon d'Or?
Yes.
What about yourself,
Very
Colin?
surprised.
Has he done enough to be the world's best player?
I think he's an incredible club level player, but that being said, it's, look at what he's surrounded with. His service is brilliant at Barcelona, so, yes, he has flares of individual talent and brilliance, but you're surrounded by genius everywhere on that team. To me, I'd say no, and point back to Brazil and look what he's done with Brazil. I think, again, the national team is an above-average squad, but he has looked more average than not in that squad. So to me, I think he's very circumstance dependent to there. So I don't think he's quite there. I think if you look at like a Messi, right? Messi is great irrespective of the uniform he puts on. Ronaldo, pretty similar in that sense that it doesn't matter sort of where he's playing. He's brilliant. So I don't think Neymar's reached that echelon yet.
No, I think I totally agree with you. But as you did say there, Colin, I think Neymar is one of these players where if my first thoughts on Neymar are very skillful, my second thought on Neymar is very selfish. But then when you sit back and you look at his record for Brazil, goals and assists, or his all-round record for Brazil, and what he is now doing for Barcelona, I think he's getting there. He's not of that level yet. I mean, I don't think, and if there are people out there, let us know, but I don't think people would pick Neymar over Messi or Neymar over Ronaldo if you could have one of them people in your team. But if he continues to do what he's doing, he's going to become Brazil's all-time record goal scorer if he continues, Colin, which is just out of this world.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think he's a fantastic player. I think you're right. He does have sort of that very uniquely sort of South American football element to it, where he's an incredibly skillful individual player, but it's hard to fit him into a team. I think that's something that's plagued Brazil a lot throughout its history is, they field incredibly talented individuals on teams, and the name of the game is getting them to play as a team. I think that's something that Luis Enrique is doing very well at Barcelona, is fitting in his individual brilliance with the team to get him to play on a different level. But to me, it has to happen across the board. He has to be able to do it, at the national level and as well as at the club level, to do it without, and shed some of that the selfishness. I think the other side is some of the disciplinary stuff. To me, if you're going to be the best player in the world, some of the disciplinary shenanigans have to stop, right? That's not something you see a Messi or, Ronaldo. Okay, yeah, he does get moody, but even on the field, it's very, very rare that he gets that out of line. Whereas Neymar seems to have a higher penchant for sort of getting out of line.
Yeah, I think there's a very fine line between selfish and brilliance. And I think a prime example, in my own opinion of this, is Gareth Bale at Tottenham basically picked up the Premier League and shook it whenever he had the ball. There was nobody could get near him, and he was selfish, but he was doing it brilliantly. When he went to Real Madrid and he had that barren spell, he was selfish, but there was no end product. There was no brilliance to it. He was just running and losing the ball. And I think that's the same with Messi and Ronaldo. You see them often. I mean, YouTube Messi, a lot of his goals are selfish. He's running past 3, 4, 5, 6 people. He could pass the ball. But that is the brilliance of it, Ryan, which is just, I think, we're in a great place at the minute where we talk about Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar, Suarez, Bale.
Yeah, we are. We've got these players that, like you said, they can run past players. They can run through a team like butter, a hot knife through butter. Get the expression right. They could pass the ball, but people in this day and age who love watching football, they just love to see a player that can charge through a team. People don't like seeing people complaining about the tiki-taka style of Barcelona or the very, very slow style. One player that can just bomb through a team. It's exciting to watch.
Indeed it is. But that's it for this week's Beyond the Touchline. I hope people have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please subscribe. Please leave a review on iTunes. Help us get up that podcast list. Please leave a like on SoundCloud. But most of all, enjoy yourself. And from the three of us, we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Touchline, a Football Manager Central podcast with your hosts, Paul, Ryan, and Colin. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode.